I think the sadness to me is that people take those who run these talk shows as reporters. They're not. I think it's to Rush Limbaugh's credit that he calls himself an entertainer.
Welcome to Worth Quoting, a program sponsored by Open Campus of Florida Community College at Jacksonville. I'm Deborah Gianoulis. As part of FCCJ's Distinguished Speaker Series, we are honored to talk to a legend in journalism, a reporter who has covered every president since John Kennedy. She is United Press International White House Bureau Chief Helen Thomas.
The crux of the problem is Israeli occupation of Lebanon, and the president of Lebanon told you that he could restore order on the border if the Israeli troops got out. Why don't you work on that?
Helen Thomas has spent the past 50 years reporting on the White House. She has a unique insight into the power and politics of the presidency. She began covering President-elect John F. Kennedy in 1960 and went to the White House in 1961 as a member of the UPI team. Every president since has been tried by her tenacity. And during a recent birthday celebration, she carried on the tradition of getting in the last word.
I say it's nice to be alive. And I'm glad I don't have to get on a treadmill to prove it.
Helen Thomas has been invited to Jacksonville as part of FCCJ's Distinguished Speaker Series. And we have you here in our studio, and we're so grateful for this time with you, Helen. Welcome.
Thank you.
You have opened and closed White House news conferences for as long as probably many of us can even remember. How did that tradition
unfortunate for me.
How did that begin?
Well, actually, I didn't start the tradition. It began in World War II with my boss, who's one of the greatest reporters I've ever known, Merriman Smith, saying thank you at the end of a Roosevelt news conference. And he used to hold them, believe it or not, twice a week in the Oval Office during World War II, which is amazing. But he couldn't be quoted directly, so there were some caveats. But that's a tradition that the oldest, the most senior wire service reporter will say thank you. But that's gone by the board now because presidents end their own press conferences. And we like that really better because they go much longer. President Bush or President Clinton would say, I'll take one more question, they take 10 more. So
Exactly.
And makes the reporters much happier.
Of course, the news conferences aren't sitting around the Oval Office anymore. Obviously, there's far more reporters today.
A formal news conference is usually in the East Room of the White House or press room, but President Clinton doesn't hold many primetime news conferences, so people say he isn't holding news conferences. He is, but they're in the afternoon and not as many people catch them.
And you might see a 20 or 30-second clip on the evening news at night and a quote in the newspaper.
That's it.
In the years that you have been a reporter, you have seen the respect for those of us in our profession go down considerably among the American public. You know, the reporters are ranked way down there now, along with, like, politicians. What has contributed to that decline in respect for the people who our job is really to bring the public in to events and places that they cannot personally go?
I think that it's been cyclical, in my view. It's not just been zoomed down, because when I started out in this business, even as a copy girl, I'd have all these press cards, and you could send me COD anywhere in the world. And people would come up and say, oh, you're a reporter, you meet such interesting people. Then in 1969, the Nixon administration began this whole anti-media campaign. Spiro Agnew led it, but it was really a Nixon administration drive goal to discredit the press and also the, being against instant analysis and so forth. And they were quite successful. People would come up and say, why don't you write the truth, and so forth. After Watergate, people would come up and say, you saved the country, meaning the reporters per se. So I don't think that's our problem to be loved or liked or anything else. And I don't care whether we're popular. I do care whether we adhere to our own code of ethics, which is to the search for the truth and to be fair, and all the other things that indicate that we have a high ethical standard in our profession. I do believe we do.
There's a broad range of our profession today. For those of us in broadcast, there's the tabloid shows, and then what we would consider more traditional news shows, and you have the same thing in the press.
And I think that's sad, because it does murk up the whole view of the press in terms of if you can really take one fact and embellish it beyond the reality, then we're all in trouble, and that's what happens in terms of tabloids and the print too. At the same time, they can hit on a story, and if we ignore it, we will be accused of covering up.
Back when you began, there were certain things that were sacred. There were elements of people's private lives that did not make it into the media. Today, it seems to many people that nothing is sacred, and that in fact our entire objective is to dig up as much dirt as we can on someone, to destroy people, to destroy often good people. There's been a lot written recently since Admiral Bourda's suicide. What is your perspective on that? Have you seen, in fact, reporters become more interested in personal issues than in perhaps issues of policy?
Well, I think that I've seen both, and I don't think that you can turn the clock back. There was an era where there was basically a gentleman's agreement, where photographers had an agreement, or they were more or less forced into the agreement of not taking pictures of Franklin Roosevelt with his braces or anything else. I think that half the country didn't know that he was paralyzed, all of these things. And anything else, basically, that was so private in the lives of other presidents. But that era is gone. Everyone's on camera, everyone's wired today. Even if you didn't write it, somebody else would, and you would have to follow on. So I think that you have to cope with what is the reality today. And I say in my speeches that you have to decide at the age of 5 if you want to go into public service and live accordingly. You have to be Caesar's wife, because the fact is that your life, your skeletons in the closet, your bank account, your finances, your family, all of these things now will be on public view, and that's the reality. I think you can overcome that, ride out the storm, and say, yes, at the age of 14, whatever. But, and I think people are very understanding and very forgiving. For example, in the '92 campaign, there were so many allegations against President Clinton. He was a candidate then, and the people decided it was the economy stupid, rather than all of these other charges against him that prevailed. So I think that we're all growing up. We put a different perspective on what is important. I think that reporters should always be aware that they can hurt people and really hurt them badly, and is it worth the candle? I mean, it isn't, is it really that important? Is it a question of accountability to your job and the impact on the public life? So you really have a choice there. I don't think that I think the sadness to me is that people take those who run these talk shows as reporters. They're not. I think it's to Rush Limbaugh's credit that he calls himself an entertainer, and some of the others, but I think the whole modus operandi of questioning people and so forth gives people an idea that these are journalists, and they're not. Because they have no accountability, they can say anything off into the wind, and there's no way to rebut them.
And no sense of ethics.
I mean, for a public servant, I mean, president can't spend 3 hours a day rebutting everything that's on the talk shows, and so. But I think it's also very good. These are good in the sense that the public gets a chance to, and certainly the callers have a good chance to say what they think, and I think that's good.
When you listen to some of those things, it sounds as if the American public is very cynical. Do you think that's true?
I think that most callers accent the negative.
Okay.
I mean, they're angry about something, but it's good to know what they're angry about.
Are reporters cynical? Good reporters.
I'm a cynic with hope, so I think it modifies. I mean, I could be cynical, but that would be the end of the road. Then there's no place to go. No, so I would say I have more hope than cynicism, and Lord knows I could be the opposite, but I don't think you can live like that. I think you always have to have some faith in mankind, faith in the public servants, faith in the president, but it's not blind faith. I mean, you really have to take into consideration everything that's going on, and I think all of us feel we could have done a better job or made a better decision.
Every president since John Kennedy, who Helen Thomas has told me was probably her favorite president, for his inspiration, for his vision. How much of that was the era, do you think, or can you separate the man from the era when it comes to the presidency?
Well, there's no question that he was a post-World War II president, and we had gone beyond the Eisenhower era, which was great because I think that Eisenhower knew war in such a way that he really did keep us out of war, major war, in the 50s. I think that Kennedy knew both, really, and I think anyone who would say, it was so wild to say right out of science fiction that we are going to land on the moon in a decade. I mean, are you out of your mind? But we did it. He didn't live to see it. He created the Peace Corps. Never saw a group of young people come to the White House, but what he didn't tell them, to give something back to the country, to go into public service. Went for the first nuclear test ban and so forth. I just think that he did have some sense of destiny. I think he knew his time was short, subjectively, and I think he really made a contribution. I think that we lost hope when but we've had presidents since then, but they've all been very pragmatic. They haven't had that idealistic eyes on the stars.
Is it possible today? Because wouldn't everybody say, that's too expensive?
They might say
Right?
it.
Cut
they
taxes.
might say it, but I think that you have to go beyond that, and you really have to inspire people that there are new worlds to conquer, and there's more and more to learn. What is a life without learning?
Do you have an impression of each president that you've covered? I mean, obviously you've told us what you think of John Kennedy, but are there just impressions of what kind of men these people were and are?
Well, I certainly have an impression of what they represented in our public life. I think that Johnson's made the greatest contribution to domestic affairs since FDR. I mean, when you think what he did in the 2 years, tailwind of the Kennedy assassination, and everybody was traumatized, and Congress was in the mood to go along with some of his ideals, Johnson got through in those 2 years Medicare, civil rights, voting rights in the South for the blacks for the first time, federal aid to education at all levels, including Head Start and so forth, public housing, the environmental laws, anti-poverty program. He thought that there should be a floor beyond which people in this country don't starve, lack for medicine, shelter. And so my impression is, of course, Vietnam was his denouement, and couldn't handle that at all. And Nixon, it's true that in foreign policy, he certainly made the breakthrough to China. But at the same time, he had been a part of a China lobby that for 20 years didn't let us even move toward any rapprochement with China. But in domestic affairs, he was moderate, and of course, Watergate scandal took him out of the picture completely.
Can we step back for a minute to the Great Society programs of Lyndon Johnson, because they are so under attack today?
Well, all I can say is, did people eat? Did children have milk? Was there a school lunch program? Was there more and more aid to education in terms of libraries, the extra programs? I mean, how can people say that?
Do people forget?
I think we've gone into a new era where compassion is out of style, And there is a self-centeredness, probably based on a lot of insecurity in terms of jobs and so forth. We don't have the same attitude that we have to help our fellow man. That sounds very preachy, but I think it's actually true. The question is that in the Reagan era, there was a Reagan Revolution, and it was every man for himself, a social Darwinism. You can't make it that tough. Ketchup is a vegetable on the school lunch program. Give me a break. I mean, no, I think the attitude and style is over. You either view this life as we're all in it together. I think we have lost our sense of unity.
Did that change come as early as the Nixon administration?
No, I think it was Nixon era. You still had a lot of programs on welfare and so forth. I think that the Reagan era started it, and I think it was the whole idea that we became a much more conservative country. And the social programs have been under attack ever since.
How about Jimmy Carter?
Jimmy Carter put human rights as the centerpiece of his foreign policy. I think he really made a big difference in Latin America in particular, and not having political opposition tortured, thrown into. We should deny aid to those countries, really, who torture their people for different political views and so forth. I think he made a big difference in foreign policy, and I think he is the most respected American today by foreign governments. Both sides can be at each other's throats, but they still want Jimmy Carter, a former president of the United States, to be the mediator. They think he'll be very fair, and I think he has been. He's really made breakthroughs in Haiti, North Korea, and so forth. He paved the way for our own government to be able to make these new agreements and even to make steps toward democracy in Haiti, denuclearize North Korea, and so forth.
He is certainly President Emeritus today in the minds of...
He's the man they really want on the scene to check on an election or try to bring two sides together. I think it's a great... obviously, people think he's a better past president, but nevertheless, he's still making a real contribution to our country and to the world.
Was he inspiring as a president?
In my point of view, he was in that sense, but I think he was very misunderstood, and certainly by the leaders of his own party, there was no rapprochement at all. And I thought that when they came to the White House, they weren't quite getting his message, and vice versa. So.
Ronald Reagan was clearly the most popular president of the recent era. Was he popular? I mean, he appeared to be quite popular with the press corps. He's a very likable man.
Very likable man.
Did he have a vision?
Yeah, he had a vision of returning us to the 1890s or something, I think. I think his vision was the good old days when everybody could, be Horatio Alger and make it and so forth. But I think
Do you think that's not possible today? Is the American dream gone?
I don't think the American dream is gone, but I think that we can compound the homelessness and the deprivation and so forth if we don't help each other. And I think, this isn't the Wild West and the pioneer days where you go out and make it. I think the horizons are more limited, but I certainly think there's always room for a dream.
Why was he so popular, and why does he continue to be?
Because he was Mr. Nice Guy, and I think that people thought that he was headed in the right direction. He was very forthcoming. He seemed to be in concrete on his convictions, that he didn't flip-flop and so forth. Well, I guess that made a good impression. By God, it was high noon every day, the American. So at the same time, he was very scripted and very scenarioed. He wanted to be that way. His top aides more or less guided all of his actions. He made the big decisions, but he was chairman of the board. He would delegate the duties, and unfortunately, sometimes the responsibilities.
Far more so than other presidents that you've covered.
He trusted his aides.
So did Nixon.
I think Nixon was very much a part of the picture in terms of being, much in on the takeoffs as well as the landings.
George Bush.
I think that he was very attuned to foreign affairs, and that's where his expertise was. I think that in some ways he must miss the presidency, but he seems to be a happy man now. He said that he believed in freedom of the press when he was president. Now he believes in freedom from the press. So
he stays out of the limelight very much.
He does.
And President Bill Clinton.
I think his heart is in the right place. I think that both he and his wife have not had a moment's rest since they came into office of being one charge after another and so forth. But nevertheless, I think he is the education president, no question about it. Now, he tried to focus mainly on the economy and domestic affairs when he came into office, but that isn't the way the world works, and foreign policy is the #1 role of a president. So, but he's been doing a good job on that score in terms of trying to move the peace process in the Middle East, in Ireland, Bosnia, Haiti, North Korea, and so forth. So I think that he's had some successes.
Do you enjoy election years, or do you prefer the non-election years? I mean, covering the White House, it's pretty hard to, everything is in campaign gear now.
Everything is seen through the prism of politics, and it's very hard to separate out what is strictly political. In fact, everything is political, so it's tougher. I think that it does take a lot out of their lives, really, to be able to accomplish anything, because you spend so much time in terms of trying to win the vote and to be understood. I suppose at the same time, a second term makes you a lame duck, and everybody wants your job. It's history. Whatever happens, we're covering it.
The politics of the presidency is something I often wonder if the American people understand. If they understand the process, if we understand the process of government, the three branches, the balance of power, negotiation, mediation has become a bad word. It's, we want all or nothing.
That's true.
And one reason that Bob Dole was so respected was his ability to make the deal.
That's exactly right.
And now it's considered a negative that he's a quote-unquote deal maker. Has the politics of the presidency changed in that regard?
I don't think the politics of the presidency. I think people want in a president more than a deal maker. I think they want somebody who has ideas about, certainly in this case, whoever wins, whether it's Dole or Clinton, they have to lead us into the 21st century. And they have to have ideas about what is really happening, the technological explosion. It's a new world. You have to be ready to cope with it. No, I think that every president is a deal maker, literally, because there's no such thing as black and white in government or anything else. So, but I think it's great to be inspired, and I think it's important to have ideals and to try to fulfill them no matter what.
Well, we'll look forward to you covering future presidents for a long time. You have I bet, no designs on retirement, do you?
I really don't, but I expected that question at some point earlier.
You have been covering the White House, obviously, a very long time. And one thing that has been consistent, of course, is change, because nothing is static, everything changes.
It's true.
Does the American public today process what we report any differently over the course of your career? Are people less informed, better informed?
Well, I think we're a country of news junkies, and I think people are better informed than we are sometimes. In fact, it can come right back at you. And I have the greatest faith that American people make up in their minds individually. I've seen Republicans vote Democratic and Democrats vote Republican. I think that all the events that occur, they are taken into consideration. We have a thinking public. I do believe that.
The education system is fundamental to our survival.
Yes, public education.
Public
especially.
education.
I'm for it.
What do you think is happening in public education today that is good, and what needs to change?
What needs to change, of course, is the violence in the classroom, the fact that you have to screen every child who comes to school. I mean, I don't know how mothers of children who go to the inner city schools cannot be worrying all day when you have so much crime. I think that needs to change. But I do think that young people are certainly better educated in the sense that it's, if only by osmosis, they do get the television news and so forth. I think teachers are trying very hard, but you shouldn't have to be a policeman, a parent, a counselor, and so forth, and then also recognize when children are being abused. All of these things have compounded, I think, the burden on the teacher. I think we have great teachers, and I believe in the public schools. The improvement, I think, in terms of it's just the whole question of the atmosphere. I certainly think they ought to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. I don't think you have to write anymore. You get on the computer. I have children 2 years old, I mean, are on those computers. They're so much smarter. I'm brain dead on this sort of thing. But
give you your pad and pencil.
No,
right?
I mean, I think that the students are great, and I think there is strong belief in education. I think rather than cut down, I know that in Michigan, I think, and so forth, because of lack of funding, they're cutting down a lot on adult education. I think that's really bad. I think your life should be in education, and that you should always keep trying to enhance it.
Probably more so today than ever in our history.
That's right, because you have to really train for new jobs. There's so little security left in terms of what you face in the future.
Just the mechanics of how you do your job.
Oh, absolutely.
I think about how it's changed in the 20 years I've been doing this.
Oh, absolutely.
I went from a manual typewriter to an electric typewriter. We started with film, we went to tape, we're on computer, and now we're on Windows. I mean, I'm sure you've seen far more changes than that.
That's true. But I like it. I like the fact that I like television. I think that it's magnificent that people can really see for themselves. They can learn so much.
Are you concerned, though, that people are not reading like they once were? Newspaper subscriptions are down.
I think it's a tragedy that we've become a country of one newspaper towns, because competition is the lifeblood of our
Can you ever
profession.
see that changing? What economic force would contribute to that, except, of course, demand? If people
I can't
demanded
see it because I'm not really a visionary to go back to the future. But no, but people will read. But I still think it's great to have that newspaper in your hand.
Thank you, Helen Thomas. We appreciate it very much. Senior White House correspondent for UPI. And a special thanks to Open Campus Distinguished Speakers Series, Florida Community College at Jacksonville.